So let's get into some more of the details on the specific vulnerabilities that we're looking to make sure that you're aware of this month. The first one is one of the two known exploited vulnerabilities. This one's the management console remote code execution vulnerability. That's one where they haven't released any indicator of compromise content or anything like that. But there are some targeted attacks that have occurred with this one. Again, this is where you need to do that additional step to do the in-console update. I'm sorry, this is the MSC one. No, my Microsoft's management console, the MSC vulnerability. So this is one where Microsoft's MSC interface, when you export an MSC config, you have a file that then you can move over and import into another Microsoft console and be able to basically take that configuration and use it in other parts of your environment. So what this fix is doing is basically enforcing a level of trust validation when one of those MSC files is opened. So the way that the threat actors can take advantage of this one is they can generate a MSC file and basically modify it in a way where it can exploit this vulnerability. And with that, they can then, take advantage of that remote code execution. So this is basically just updating the way that the management console enforces things to make sure that it's looking at that file more, it's scrutinizing it more and making sure that it's a trusted file. And if it's not, blocking it from being able to run. So this is one of the two that was confirmed to be exploited. My apologies, I read that for a second and my brain went from Microsoft's config manager console over to the MSC, which they're two separate things. So this one is the MSC vulnerability. It is actively being exploited in the wild. It's updated by doing the OS update. So it does affect all versions of the operating system, including the newly released Windows 11 24H2. So make sure that you've got your OS update prioritized as your top priority this month. The second vulnerability that is being targeted is the Windows MS-HTML platform spoofing vulnerability. The severity on this one was only moderate. So, many of you who have been following us for a while, you've heard me talk about this many times. We can't always take the vendor severity and the CVSS score at face value. That's a starting point. It's a static algorithm. It tries to assess things and give you a general idea of the risk there. Most of the exploits we see are not in vulnerabilities that are rated as critical by Microsoft or have a high CVSS score. So so far this year, I think out of all the 0 days that Microsoft has resolved, not maybe only one of those was actually rated as critical. Majority of them were importance. And now this, I believe, is the second one this year that was a moderate severity with a CVSS score in the 6x or lower range. I think 2 or 3 months ago, we had a 5x for a CVSS score. So those things don't really matter to threat actors. They're going to find things that they can take advantage of. And oftentimes a harder to exploit vulnerability like this is chained with other ones to basically get the combo that they need to take over a system. So again, when we talk about things like this, you should be shifting to more of a risk-based approach. In a case where we've got other real-world risks to be taken into account, you need to basically take that initial severity rating and CVSS score, but treat it as a higher risk to the environment. So make sure that this and the other vulnerability, because they're both important or moderate, these are the two that you really need to worry about this month. Make sure that that's coming into your prioritization, and you're aware that the two exploits that are actively being targeted right now are both part of the OS. Your OS update this month is definitely going to be your top priority. All right, we did have 3 other vulnerabilities that were publicly disclosed, but not there's no exploitation currently going on for these. The first one is another curl, open source curl vulnerability. So the Windows version of curl has an update available. The OS update should resolve this for most cases, but there is a couple of specific standalone versions of curl that can be updated to resolve that as well. If your development teams or engineering teams are using that in some way, they may have to do some updating of that standalone version, but the OS update takes care of the version of curl that ships with the OS. The second vulnerability is in Windows Hyper-V. It's a security feature bypass. This one, in the write-up that they did, they talk about the fact that it's a little bit harder to take advantage of, and this is why the severity and CVSS score are a little bit lower. There needs to be a reboot in the workflow to be able to try to exploit this. Now, can a threat actor convince somebody to have to reboot? Yeah, there's ways that they can socially engineer that, sure. But basically, they would have to, figure out a way to force a reboot into the experience, and then on reboot, they're able to take advantage of the UEFI interface to bypass the security interfaces there. If they do that, they get kernel level access at the hypervisor level. So that's their way of being able to bypass the UEFI security interfaces and try to get down to a kernel level where they can do some much more dangerous things. And the third one is a WinLogon elevation of privilege vulnerability. Another important vulnerability. An attacker who successfully exploits this can gain system level privileges. So this is one where those of you who have multilingual keyboards and interfaces throughout your environment, the way that an attacker can take advantage of this is using a third-party IME. So that input experience. If you go into the knowledge base article where they talk about this more, it has a screenshot of the login screen. And if you have multiple keyboard layouts for that system, you'll basically have options that are available there for English, for Chinese simplified, and so on. When you start to deal with different keyboard layouts where you've got a Chinese keyboard or something like that, Japanese keyboard, or an Arabic keyboard or one of the other types there, these IMEs allow you to interface with the login experience to make sure you're using the right keyboard layout to input the password. Companies that use Microsoft's IMEs, that's the ideal experience here, and what Microsoft is suggesting is the most optimal here. They still plug the vulnerability, but using a third-party IME leaves you exposed to whatever that IME was designed for. So in this case, somebody who maybe has a third-party IME experience for login is able to, put something else in there, so they could introduce something else into the mix where they could glean additional information or, do something else during that sign-in process. So Microsoft's additional guidance here is use their IME experience if you're doing that, and that helps to further insulate you from any future vulnerabilities in this type of scenario.